What began as a routine promotional appearance for Cruise's latest blockbuster devolved into the most shocking on-air celebrity confrontation in recent memory, leaving audiences and industry insiders reeling. The bright lights of Jimmy Kimmel's studio illuminated what should have been just another celebrity interview. Tom Cruise, Hollywood's enduring action star, arrived to thunderous applause, flashing his signature smile as he bounded onto the stage with characteristic enthusiasm. Dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, he waved to the audience, exchanging the expected pleasantries with Kimmel before taking his seat. "Tom Cruise, everybody," Kimmel announced, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of a late-night host who had done this thousands of times. "Welcome back to the show." "Always good to be here, Jimmy," Cruise replied, adjusting slightly in his chair. His energy was palpable, clearly ready to discuss his latest film, a high-octane spy thriller that industry insiders were already calling his best work in years. The interview began innocuously enough. Kimmel asked about stunts in the new film, and Cruise launched into an animated description of hanging from a helicopter over the Grand Canyon. The audience gasped and applauded at all the right moments. Yet keen observers might have noticed something off in Kimmel's demeanor, a tightness around his eyes, an edge to his smile that hadn't been there in previous interviews. "So you did that stunt yourself?" Kimmel asked, his tone carrying a subtly dismissive undertone. "At your age? Impressive." A flicker of confusion crossed Cruise's face, but his smile remained intact. "Well, you know me, Jimmy. I like to give the audience the real thing." "The real thing," Kimmel repeated, nodding slowly. "Speaking of real things, I've been wanting to ask you about some real things that don't make it into the press junkets." The studio's atmosphere shifted imperceptibly. Camera operators exchanged glances. The show's producer took a half-step forward from the wings. "Sure," Cruise said, his smile dimming slightly. "What's on your mind?" Kimmel leaned forward. "You've been in the industry forever, Tom. Longer than almost anyone. You've seen people come and go. People like Harvey Weinstein, for instance." The name dropped like a stone into still water. A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the audience. Cruise's expression froze momentarily. "I'm not sure I follow," he said carefully. "Well, you worked with him on a couple of projects, didn't you? Before everything came out? I'm just curious if you ever noticed anything off." Cruise shifted in his seat. "Jimmy, I'm here to talk about the film. I think there are more appropriate forums for discussions about—" "So you did notice something?" Kimmel interrupted, his eyebrows raised in exaggerated surprise. "Because a lot of people claim they had no idea, which seems hard to believe when so many knew and said nothing." The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Cruise's publicist, standing off stage, was already on her phone, furiously texting. "I think you're putting words in my mouth," Cruise said, his voice level but carrying a new edge. "And frankly, I'm not sure what this has to do with my current project." "Just making conversation," Kimmel replied, with a shrug that seemed calculated to provoke. "But let's move on then. Let's talk about how you maintain such control over your public image. Must be exhausting, right?" The implication hung in the air. This wasn't the standard celebrity softball interview anymore. Kimmel was probing at something deeper, more personal. The audience's discomfort was palpable now, the energy in the room shifting from entertainment to voyeuristic tension. "I focus on the work," Cruise answered, his legendary composure beginning to show cracks. "Always have." "The work and certain beliefs?" Kimmel pressed, his tone making it clear what he was referring to. Cruise sat up straighter. "Jimmy, I respect you as a host, but I'm getting the impression you didn't invite me here to discuss the film at all." "Oh, come on, Tom," Kimmel said with a dismissive wave. "You've been doing this dance for decades. The same rehearsed answers, the same controlled narrative. Don't you ever get tired of it? Don't you think the audience deserves a little reality instead of the Tom Cruise TM experience?" The trademark symbol was audible in Kimmel's inflection, a deliberate jab that caused a sharp intake of breath from audience members. Cruz's expression darkened visibly, the famous smile now completely absent. "I think what audiences deserve is respect," Cruz replied, his voice lower but firm. "And that extends to your guests too. If you had questions about topics beyond my current film, your team could have mentioned that beforehand." "Would you have come?" Kimmel asked, with a sardonic tilt of his head. "That's not the point," Cruz responded. "Isn't it, though?" Kimmel leaned back in his chair, a strange satisfaction in his expression. "The great Tom Cruise, only available for discussion on pre-approved topics. Tell me, do you pre-approve discussions with your loved ones too? Or just media appearances?" The personal nature of the attack hung in the air. Even Kimmel's band leader glanced nervously at the producer, who was now making slashing motions across his throat, the universal sign to cut or change direction. Cruz's face flushed slightly, but when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. "I came here in good faith, Jimmy. I'm starting to question your intentions with this interview." "My intentions?" Kimmel repeated, feigning innocence. "I'm just trying to have an honest conversation. Isn't that what everyone wants these days? Authenticity?" "There's a difference between authenticity and ambush," Cruz countered, setting his water glass down with deliberate care. "And right now, this feels like the latter." The tension in the studio was reaching a breaking point. Camera operators shifted uncomfortably. The audience was deadly silent now, witnessing something rarely seen in the carefully orchestrated world of late-night television. Genuine conflict, unscripted and raw. "Maybe the real Tom Cruise doesn't like questions he can't control," Kimmel suggested, a provocative smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe the real Tom Cruise is a lot less likable than the carefully constructed public image." Cruz stood abruptly, removing his microphone. "I think we're done here, Jimmy." The gasp from the audience was audible. No one walked out on Jimmy Kimmel, especially not a star of Cruz's magnitude. "Sit down, Tom," Kimmel said, his tone shifting to something harder. "We haven't even gotten to the part about your family yet, and I think people would be very interested to hear about the real dynamics there." The studio fell into a shocked silence. Even Kimmel's most loyal audience members exchanged uncomfortable glances. The producer was now frantically signaling from offstage, making increasingly desperate gestures that Kimmel deliberately ignored. Cruz stood motionless, microphone in hand, his face a masterclass in controlled rage. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me," Kimmel replied, leaning back in his chair with feigned casualness that couldn't quite mask the aggression beneath. "Your public family persona versus the reality. Don't you think people deserve to know the truth?" Cruz slowly reattached his microphone and sat back down. The action was deliberate, calculated. This wasn't a retreat. It was a man choosing his battlefield. "Let me be very clear, Jimmy," Cruz said, his famous intensity now focused entirely on the host. "My children are off limits. Always have been, always will be. Everyone in this industry knows that line exists." "Do they?" Kimmel asked with mock innocence. "Because I've got a stack of tabloids that suggest otherwise. And sources, reliable sources, who paint a very different picture than the devoted father you portray." The audience's discomfort was now shifting to something else, a collective recognition that they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that would dominate entertainment news cycles for weeks to come. "Sources," Cruz repeated, the word dripping with contempt. "Anonymous sources with agendas and paychecks. That's what you're basing this on? That's journalism to you?" "Don't lecture me about journalism, Tom," Kimmel snapped, his affable host. Persona completely abandoned now. "Not when you've spent decades controlling every narrative, approving every question, orchestrating every spontaneous moment of your public life." Cruz leaned forward. "You know what I find interesting, Jimmy? You invite me here, ostensibly to talk about a film that hundreds of people worked incredibly hard on, people whose livelihoods depend on its success. And instead, you choose to ambush me with tabloid garbage? Oh, please, Kimmel scoffed. Like you need the promotional help. This is about pulling back the curtain on the great and powerful Tom Cruise, the man who can't handle a single unscripted question. A cold smile spread across Cruise's face. Is that what this is about? Your ego? You wanted to be the one who finally got to Tom Cruise on live television? This isn't about me, Kimmel insisted, though his expression suggested otherwise. Isn't it? Cruise countered. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a desperate attempt to boost your failing ratings. How long has it been since you were relevant, Jimmy? How long since anyone cared what happened on this show? The audience collectively inhaled. Cruise had landed a direct hit, and Kimmel's momentary flinch confirmed it. At least I'm authentic, Kimmel fired back, color rising in his cheeks. People see the real me. Can you say the same? The real you? Cruise gave a short, humorless laugh. The real Jimmy Kimmel just ambushed a guest on national television because he's desperate for attention. That's who you really are. A man who'll sacrifice professionalism, respect, and common decency for a viral moment. Kimmel's jaw tightened. Don't pretend you know me. And don't pretend you know anything about my family, Cruise retorted, his voice deadly quiet. You cross that line, and we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. The threat hung in the air, not physical but professional. The implication of what Tom Cruise's influence could do to a host who had violated one of Hollywood's unspoken rules. Are you threatening me, Tom? Kimmel asked, attempting to regain the upper hand. I'm setting a boundary, Cruise clarified, his gaze unwavering. Something you seem incapable of respecting. But let me be crystal clear. Discuss my children again, and this will be the last interview I ever do on this show. And I suspect many of my colleagues will follow suit. The power dynamic had shifted. Cruise, despite being the one ambushed, had somehow regained control of the situation. Kimmel seemed to realize it too, his expression flickering between anger and calculation. You know what your problem is, Tom, Kimmel said, changing tactics. You can't handle reality. You live in this bubble where everyone says yes, everyone follows your rules, everyone pretends the whispers and rumors don't exist. And you, Cruise countered, live in a world where those whispers and rumors are currency, where destroying someone's privacy equals good television, where crossing lines is justified if it gets you clicks and views. The audience was completely silent now, witnessing what felt less like an interview and more like a gladiatorial combat. Two powerful men engaged in a fight with potentially career-altering stakes. You're a dinosaur, Tom, Kimmel said, his voice hardening. The era of the untouchable movie star is over. People want transparency now. They want truth. No, Cruise shook his head. People want respect, dignity, decency. Things you clearly know nothing about. Kimmel's eyes narrowed. You know, I've heard interesting things about your relationship with your daughter. Things that contradict that perfect father image you've crafted so carefully. The line had been crossed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cruise's expression transformed, the practiced celebrity mask dropping completely to reveal something few had ever seen. Raw, unfiltered fury. Say another word about my daughter, Cruise said, each word precisely enunciated, and you will regret it for the rest of your career. Is that right? Kimmel leaned forward, a reckless gleam in his eye. Because according to my sources, you haven't even spoken to her in... Cruise moved with the lightning-fast reflexes that had made him famous on screen. He was on his feet before Kimmel could finish his sentence. The microphone yanked from his lapel and slammed onto the desk between them. That's it, Cruise declared, his voice eerily controlled despite the fury evident in every line of his body. We're done here. Kimmel's smug expression faltered. He hadn't expected Cruz to actually walk. Celebrities needed his platform too much to risk burning this bridge. But the look in Cruz's eyes made it clear this wasn't a bluff. "Oh, come on, Tom," Kimmel said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "It's just a question. If there's nothing to hide—" "It's not about hiding," Cruz cut him off, his voice carrying throughout the now silent studio. "It's about respect, something you clearly know nothing about." The audience was frozen, collectively holding their breath. This wasn't the manufactured drama of reality TV. This was genuine conflict between two of entertainment's most powerful figures, unfolding in real time. "The public has a right to know," Kimmel began, but Cruz wasn't having it. "The public has a right to know about my films, my professional choices," Cruz interrupted, his tone razor-sharp. "My children have a right to privacy. The fact that you can't distinguish between the two says everything about your character and nothing about mine." A few audience members began to applaud, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Cruz had articulated something that resonated beyond the immediate conflict, the boundary between public interest and human decency. Kimmel's face reddened, his ego visibly bruised by the audience's response. "Sit down and finish the interview, Tom. Don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" Cruz gave a short, incredulous laugh. "That's rich coming from the man who just tried to ambush me with gossip about my family for ratings. Tell me, Jimmy, is this what your show has come to? Trafficking in tabloid rumors because you can't create genuine content anymore?" The question landed like a physical blow. Kimmel's producers were now openly gesturing for a commercial break, but the host ignored them, too committed to his course of action to back down now. "You think you're untouchable," Kimmel said, his voice taking on an ugly edge. "That's your problem, Tom. You think the rules don't apply to you." "And you think there are no rules at all," Cruz fired back. "No lines you won't cross for attention. That makes you dangerous, Jimmy. Not edgy, not brave. Just dangerous and sad." Cruz turned to leave, but Kimmel made one final desperate attempt to regain control. "Walk out that door, and everyone will know you're hiding something," he called. After him. Cruz stopped. For a moment the studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. He turned back slowly, fixing Kimmel with a stare that made several audience members physically recoil. "What they'll know," Cruz said deliberately, "is that I refuse to participate in the public degradation of my family for your entertainment. What they'll know is that some things, like the dignity and privacy of my children, are more important to me than publicity or your approval." He gestured around the studio. "Look around, Jimmy. Is this what you wanted? To destroy what little credibility you had left? Because that's what's happening right now. Not to me, to you." Kimmel's expression flickered, uncertainty creeping in as he registered the room's mood. The gambit that had seemed so clever in pre-production was backfiring spectacularly. Even his most loyal staff looked uncomfortable now, some avoiding eye contact altogether. "You've made your choice," Cruz continued, his voice steady. "You chose cheap sensationalism over professional integrity. You chose to ambush someone who came here in good faith. That's on you. And when your producers are tallying the damage this does to your show, remember, you did this to yourself." An older woman in the front row stood up, beginning to applaud. Then another audience member joined, and another, until half the studio was on their feet, not necessarily supporting Cruz or his beliefs, but recognizing and respecting his unwavering defense of his family's privacy. Kimmel's face cycled through emotions: anger, embarrassment, and finally, the dawning realization that he had seriously miscalculated. The applause wasn't for him. It was for the guest he had tried to humiliate. "Cut to commercial," he muttered to his producers, all pretense of control abandoned. But Cruz wasn't finished. He approached the desk one last time, leaning in close, enough that their conversation wouldn't be picked up by the boom mics. though his expression made the content clear enough. You come after my family again, on your show, on social media, anywhere, and I will dedicate resources you can't imagine to making sure everyone knows exactly who Jimmy Kimmel really is, he said quietly. Do we understand each other? The threat wasn't physical, but it didn't need to be. In Hollywood, reputation was currency, and Cruise had just made it clear he was willing to spend liberally if provoked further. Kimmel's face drained of color. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Without another word, Cruise straightened, turned his back on the host, and walked off the set with the same confident stride that had carried him through decades in the spotlight. No rage, no further drama, just the quiet dignity of someone who knew exactly where his boundaries lay and was prepared to defend them at any cost. "We'll be right back," Kimmel managed weakly as the cameras began to cut away. But the damage was done. Already, phones throughout the audience were lighting up as people shared what they'd witnessed. By morning, Yo Kimmel Cruise face-off would be trending nationwide, with public opinion falling overwhelmingly on the side of the actor who had refused to sacrifice his family's privacy for ratings. As for Kimmel, the incident would mark the beginning of a career decline, a tangible reminder that even in an era of boundary-pushing entertainment, some lines remained uncrossable. The confrontation would become a case study in what happens when the pursuit of viral moments overshadows basic human decency. And Tom Cruise? He would issue no statements, give no interviews about the incident. He didn't need to. His actions in that studio had said everything necessary about where he stood, not as a movie star defending his image, but as a father protecting what truly mattered.